Gwen Taylor didn't see the rock until after her ankle snapped. 1 second, she was laughing with her friend on the sun-warmed shore of Malibu Beach. The next she was crumpled in the sand, her sunglasses flung sideways and a white hot pain shooting up her leg. "Gwen," her best friend Mia gasped, racing toward her. Gwen tried to sit up, but the stabbing pain in her left ankle made her vision blur. I think it's broken," she said through gritted teeth. A small crowd gathered and a few concerned beachgoers hovered, offering water and help, but Gwen barely heard them. Her heart was thudding and the sun suddenly felt too hot, like it was pressing down on her chest. "I'll call for help," Mia said, fumbling with her phone, panic in her voice. "No," Gwen whispered. "Please don't call an ambulance, I can't afford," but her voice caught as the pain flared again. Then a deep, calm voice cut through the chaos. "She needs to be moved, carefully." Gwen turned her head, squinting at the figure stepping through the crowd. A man, tall, shirtless, tanned, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of stormy skies. He crouched beside her, his presence quiet but commanding. "Hi," he said gently. "I'm going to help you, is that okay?" She blinked up at him. "Who are you?" He gave a quick smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just someone with strong arms and a little first aid training." Before she could argue, he slid his arms under her legs and back in one smooth motion. Gwen gasped as he lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. The crowd parted. She could hear her heart pounding louder than the waves. "You really don't have to carry me," she mumbled, clinging to his shoulders. "You can't walk," he said. "And I'm not leaving you here, you're going to the ER. "I can't afford, I'll take care of it," she blinked. "What?" But he didn't answer. He was already striding toward the parking lot. In the glaring sunlight, the car that came into view wasn't just any car. It was a sleek black Aston Martin, parked slightly away from the rest. Mia caught up, wide-eyed, as he gently placed Gwen into the passenger seat like she was made of glass. "I'll meet you at the hospital," Mia said, then turned to the man. "Thank you." "Seriously?" He gave a nod and closed Gwen's door, then got in and started the engine like he'd done it 1,000 times. Gwen stared at the dashboard. "You're rich, aren't you?" He glanced at her. "That obvious?" She gave a half laugh, then winced. "Kind of, I'm Alec." "Alec Kessler," she looked at him. Gwen Taylor. "Nice to meet you, Gwen Taylor. Sorry it's under these circumstances." She gave him a sideways look. "Are you always at the beach saving strangers?" He smiled again. "Only on Tuesdays." The hospital visit was a blur. Alex stayed the whole time, even when Gwen told him he didn't have to. He filled out paperwork, gave the nurse his card without blinking, and waited outside the X-ray room like he had nothing better to do. When the doctor confirmed the fracture and wrapped her foot in a boot, Alec was still there, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "You're good to go," the nurse said, "but you'll need crutches. And you shouldn't be alone the first few days." Gwen's stomach dropped. "I live in a walk-up." "No elevator, I'll figure something out." Alex stepped forward. "You're not climbing stairs on a broken ankle." She narrowed her eyes. "What are you suggesting?" He hesitated. "Come stay at my place. Just until you're steady, I have an elevator and a guest room. And a private nurse on call if needed." "I don't even know you." "You're right," he said. "But I didn't carry you off the beach to drop you at your apartment and hope for the best." She stared at him, trying to read his face. "Why are you doing this?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Because you need help, and I can give it," she exhaled. "Fine, but one night, that's it," he nodded. "Deal." Gwen instantly regretted saying yes the moment they pulled up to his place, his penthouse. It sat on the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the Pacific, with a private elevator and a doorman who greeted Alec by name. The inside was all polished stone, floor-to-ceiling windows, and modern art that probably cost more than her entire student loan debt. He helped her onto a plush velvet couch, set her foot up on a silk pillow, and disappeared into the kitchen. When he came back, he was holding a tray with soup, a glass of chilled water, and a painkiller. "Eat. You'll feel better." She stared at him. "You're a billionaire, aren't you?" He didn't flinch. "Yes," Gwen blinked. "And you just hang out at the beach," he shrugged. I was raised in LA, I like the water, helps me think. She shook her head slowly. This is insane, I know. They were quiet for a moment. The only sound was the ocean outside the window, then Alec said, "So, what do you do when you're not breaking ankles?" Gwen gave a tired laugh. "I'm a graphic designer, freelance, mostly struggling," he nodded. "Do you like it?" "I love it," she said. "Even if it doesn't pay much," he smiled. "Good, you should keep doing it." That night, he let her sleep in the guest room with blackout curtains, soft sheets, and a view of the moonlit sea. When he closed the door behind him, Gwen stared at the ceiling, her ankle throbbing and her brain spinning. Why was a man like Alec helping her? And why did it feel like her life was about to change forever? Gwen woke to the low sound of distant waves and the faint scent of coffee drifting through the partially open door. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The mattress beneath her was far too soft, the sheets crisp and cool against her skin. Then the ache in her ankle throbbed, sharp and insistent, and it all came rushing back. She pushed herself upright, wincing as the boot tugged at her leg. The massive windows across from the bed revealed a pale lavender sky, the horizon stretching endlessly beyond the glass. She'd never woken up to a view like that in her life. "Morning," Alec said from the doorway. He leaned one shoulder against the frame, dressed in a slate-colored button-down and tailored trousers, sleeves rolled to his forearms. A steaming mug was in his hand. "Didn't mean to barge in," he added. "I brought you this." She accepted the coffee hesitantly. "Thanks." "You really didn't have to." "I wanted to." She took a careful sip. It was exactly how she liked it, strong, with a hint of cinnamon. Her eyes narrowed. "Did Mia tell you how I take it?" "No, just a lucky guess." "A lucky guess with cinnamon," he smiled faintly. "I pay attention." She shifted, trying not to jostle her foot. "So, what now? Am I supposed to just sit here all day and stare at the ocean?" "You could do that." Or, he placed a small black tablet on the bed beside her, "You could use this. It's connected to everything: entertainment, deliveries, even the intercom. If you need anything, just press the gold icon." She looked at the device, then back at him. "You're used to people depending on you, aren't you?" He didn't answer right away. "I try to make things easier where I can." That sounds like something someone says when they don't want to talk about themselves. "I don't," he said plainly. She blinked. "That honest, huh? No use pretending otherwise. But I will say this, I'm glad you stayed." She stared at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. "I have to head out," he added. "There's a meeting across town. You'll be safe here. Security knows you're a guest." "Security?" she repeated. He gave a small nod, already moving toward the hallway. "There's a team in the building. Just a precaution." Before she could ask what kind of life required that kind of protection, he was gone. Gwen spent most of the morning exploring the penthouse at a slow, careful pace. A pair of crutches had been left beside the bed, likely arranged by Alec before dawn. The living room resembled something from a design magazine, sleek without being cold, dotted with intriguing details. A black and white photo of a jazz musician, a leather-bound collection of poetry in Italian, a sculpture made entirely of gears. But what fascinated her most was the art tucked into corners. A small canvas, barely larger than a sheet of paper, hung between two towering windows. It depicted a storm-tossed sea, its brushstrokes chaotic and emotional. It didn't fit the rest of the decor. It felt personal. By late afternoon, she was restless. She tried to sketch on her tablet, but her thoughts kept circling back to Alec, the way he'd carried her without hesitation, the way he'd looked at her not with pity but like he was trying to understand her. The sound of the elevator chiming pulled her from her thoughts. Moments later, Alec stepped into the living room, loosening his tie as he crossed the room. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." She set the sketchpad aside. "How was your meeting?" "Predictable. Loud men in louder suits arguing about things that don't matter." "Sounds thrilling." He gave a quiet laugh. "I'd rather be here." She tilted her head. "Is that something you say to all the injured women you rescue?" "No." He sat on the ottoman across from her. "Just the ones who challenge me before they've had their second cup of coffee." Gwen leaned back into the cushions. You don't seem like someone who gets challenged often. I'm surrounded by people who say what they think I want to hear. Sounds lonely. It is. She studied him for a moment. You don't act like a man with everything. His gaze flicked to hers. Maybe because I know what that illusion costs. She waited, sensing he was on the verge of saying something more. When I was 22, he said finally, my father died, left everything to me. The company, the mess, the expectations. I had no choice but to grow up fast. I'm sorry, he shook his head. Don't be, it taught me to see people for what they really are. And what am I? She asked softly, his eyes didn't waver. Someone who doesn't care about the money. You looked at me like I was just a man, not an opportunity. I'm not impressed by penthouses, she said, though her voice wasn't dismissive. No, he said. You're impressed by honesty and maybe a good cup of coffee. Gwen smiled, but it faded as she looked down at her foot. I hate feeling helpless. You're not. I can't even walk across a room without crutches. But you're still here, you're still yourself. She looked up. You say that like it's something admirable. It is. There was a pause, a thick, charged stillness between them. Then Alex stood and walked toward the kitchen. I ordered dinner, he said. Something simple. Let me guess. Imported truffle pasta and caviar, pizza, he called over his shoulder. From a place I liked before everything changed. She laughed. Now that's impressive. They ate on the terrace, the air warm and filled with the scent of basil and grilled dough. Gwen balanced her plate on her lap, her foot propped up on a low ottoman. Do you ever miss being unknown? She asked. Every day. Then why not walk away? Because if I did, someone worse would take my place. She let that settle before saying, that sounds heavy. It is, but it matters. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across Alec's features. Gwen watched him in profile, the wind shifting a strand of hair across his forehead. You look different when you're not trying to be in control, she said. He turned to her, something unreadable in his expression. So do you. Her throat tightened. Suddenly, the air wasn't warm, it was electric. Neither spoke, but something passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. Something neither of them fully understood yet. But neither of them looked away. The next morning, Gwen found herself seated on a velvet bench in what could only be described as a private library dressed like a sunlit cathedral. The walls were lined with shelves of hardcovers, some worn, some pristine, none of them anything she could imagine Alec actually reading. As far as she knew, billionaires didn't read fiction. But apparently, Alec Kessler was full of contradictions. He'd taken the day off, citing important personal obligations. And while Gwen had insisted she didn't need babysitting, he'd ignored her entirely and started making breakfast. From scratch. Why do you even have cookbooks? She asked, watching him dice shallots with surprising precision. They were my mother's, Alex said, not looking up. She used to cook on Sundays before my father would fly out for the week. It was the only time we felt like a real family. You don't talk about her much. She died when I was 17, cancer. Gwen paused, fingers tightening on the edge of the marble counter. I'm sorry. She was the only one who called me by my full name, Alexander. She smiled faintly. Somehow that fits. Sounds like someone who wears cufflinks. He chuckled, setting the knife aside. She used to say, Alexander, power means nothing if you don't know when to put it down. I didn't understand it then. I do now. You think you've learned how? I'm trying, he said, sliding a plate of eggs and roasted vegetables in front of her. This is step one. They ate in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. When Gwen reached for her crutches, Alec placed a hand over hers. I want to show you something before you get too comfortable, he said. Come on, I've got a surprise. She eyed him cautiously. What kind of surprise? The kind that involves a helicopter. Her eyes widened. You're joking. I never joke about helicopters. He helped her into a pair of soft-soled shoes and carried her down to the rooftop helipad where a black aircraft waited, its rotors still. Gwen's protests faded the moment she saw the pilot wave from the cockpit and the city stretching out endlessly beyond the edge of the roof. Where are we going? She asked as Alex secured her seatbelt. You'll see. The flight lasted 20 minutes. Gwen kept her eyes on the sea, the coastline slipping past in streaks of gold and sapphire. When they finally descended, it was onto a wide, manicured lawn surrounded by wild cypress trees and the smell of salt air. A glass-walled house perched on the cliff's edge, elegant and isolated. "This is mine," Alec said as he lifted her from the seat. "Well, one of mine. You have a backup mansion." He carried her down a stone path toward a bench overlooking the ocean. "This one's not for business. I come here when I need to remember who I am." Gwen glanced around. "Doesn't look like anyone's lived in it for a while." "No one has," he said. "Not since I built it. I wasn't ready to share it until now." She studied him. "Why now?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat beside her on the bench, his gaze fixed on the sea. "I've spent years building walls," he said quietly, "around everything, my past, my name, my life. But when I saw you fall on that beach, I didn't think, I just ran. Because you're a good person." "No," he said. "Because you made me want to protect something real. Something that wasn't tied to money or legacy." Gwen's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands and whispered, "You barely know me, Alec." "I know enough," he said, his voice rougher now. "I know the way your eyebrows lift when you're curious. The way you breathe through pain instead of complaining. I know you don't play games and you don't pretend." Her heart beat fast, too fast. "I wasn't expecting this," she murmured. "Neither was I." They sat in silence, the wind brushing her hair against her cheek. She didn't pull away when Alec reached up and gently tucked the strand behind her ear. "This place," he said, voice low, "was meant to be my escape, but I think maybe it was waiting for you." Gwen looked at him, trying to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. He leaned in slowly, giving her space to pull away. She didn't. His lips brushed hers, tentative but sure, like a promise half-formed. The kiss deepened, and suddenly her hand was curled against his chest, her injured ankle forgotten for a moment as the wind whipped around them. When they finally pulled apart, Gwen's breath trembled. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," Alec admitted, "but I know I'm not going back to pretending I don't want more." She looked at the sea, then back at him. "I'm scared." "So am I." He stood and cradled her in his arms again, walking toward the house. "Let me show you the rest," he said. "And if you still want to leave after that, I'll take you home." Inside, the space was warm with light and pared-down elegance. No art on the walls. No statement pieces, just wood, stone, and soft linen furniture. Alex set her down on a chaise by the fireplace and started a flame with the flick of a switch. "This is the only place I never brought anyone else," he said. "No assistants, no investors. Not even family." She looked around, noting how untouched it all felt. "Why not?" "Because I didn't trust anyone not to ruin it. And you trust me." "I'm trying to," he said, "even if it scares the hell out of me." She reached out and took his hand. "You're not the only one." He crouched beside her, fingers tightening around hers. "Then maybe we can be scared together." Gwen let her forehead rest against his, closing her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to carry everything on her own. And maybe, just maybe, this man who could afford anything was offering her the one thing she'd stopped believing in. Something real. A week later, Gwen stood on the balcony of Alec's main penthouse, her crutches leaned carefully against the wall behind her. The boot was still on her foot, but the pain had dulled into something manageable. The city stretched before her like a painting in motion, sunlight glinting off rooftops, traffic humming far below, the Pacific glimmering beyond in the distance. Behind her, the low murmur of music played from speakers tucked discreetly into the ceiling. It was the kind of instrumental jazz that made everything feel more cinematic than real. Alec emerged from the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of a dark navy shirt. He looked up and caught her gaze. "You're staring like you're about to jump," he said, crossing the room. "I'm wondering how this is my life," Gwen replied. 3 weeks ago, I was eating cereal for dinner in a studio apartment with a leaky shower. Now I'm—" She gestured around her. "Here." He walked to where she stood and leaned on the railing beside her. "If it helps, I still eat cereal for dinner sometimes, usually when I'm avoiding paperwork." "You're not normal," she said, but her voice was warm. "I never claimed to be." Alec turned to face her more fully. "I've been thinking about something, Gwen, and before you say anything, I know the timing is fast. I know it's crazy, but I've never been the kind of man who waits around hoping things will make more sense later." She stared at him, her chest tightening. "What are you about to ask me?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box her breath caught. "I know what this looks like," he said, "but it's not a ring, not yet, it's a key." He opened the box. Inside, a delicate gold key glinted under the sunlight. "I had a new lock installed," he said. "To the place on the cliffs, you remember what I said, that I'd never brought anyone there?" She nodded slowly. "I want you to have a choice," he continued. "Not an obligation, not pressure, just somewhere you can go when you need quiet. When the world gets loud, when I get loud." She took a step back, surprised by the emotion that rushed forward. "You're giving me a house." "I'm giving you a place that's mine," he said, "because I want it to be yours too." Gwen looked down at the key, then up at him. "You don't do this often, do you?" He laughed under his breath. "No, I don't even let people park in my driveway without an appointment." She took the key from the box carefully, turning it in her palm like it might disappear. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted. "I don't know what happens when the boot comes off and I'm not broken anymore." Alec's expression softened. "You were never broken." "I'm not used to people staying," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, "but I won't trap you either. You can walk away anytime." "You'll still have the key, you'll still have me." She blinked back tears and turned to look out over the city again. "I spent so long building a life that didn't need anyone else," she said. "And then you walked into it like it was always supposed to be yours." He didn't speak. He just stood beside her, letting the silence stretch. Then she looked at him. "I don't want to walk away." Alec met her gaze, something fierce and unguarded behind his eyes. "Then don't." Later that night, she found herself barefoot on the rooftop garden he rarely used, the city lights flickering below like fireflies. Alec had set up a table with candles and a string of small amber bulbs. The dinner was simple grilled fish, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of wine he'd opened with surprising awkwardness. "I'm not great at this part," he admitted as he poured her a glass. "What part?" "The romantic part. I know how to close deals, I know how to read a room. But this," he gestured between them, "this is new." Gwen took the wine. "Then let's figure it out together." They ate under the stars, the conversation easy, full of stories they hadn't shared yet. He told her about the time he got lost in Tokyo and ended up sleeping in a ramen shop. She told him about the mural she once painted on the side of a bakery for free, just because the owner reminded her of her grandmother. When the plates were cleared and the city had grown quieter, Alec reached into his jacket pocket again. This time, it was a different box. Her heart jumped. "This one is a ring," he said, opening it without flourish. The diamond was oval cut, set in a band of brushed gold, elegant without being flashy, honest. "I want to be more than the man who carried you off a beach," he said. "I want to be the man you build a life with." Mornings, arguments, decades, all of it. She stared at the ring, then at him. "I thought you said the key wasn't pressure," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "It's not," he said. "This is the opposite of pressure. This is permission for both of us to want more." Her hands shook slightly as she reached out and closed the box. "I want to say yes," she said, "but not until I can walk again, not until I can stand on my own." Alec nodded, no disappointment in his eyes. "Then I'll wait." She leaned forward and kissed him, long and slow, until the night faded into something softer. 2 weeks later, when the doctor finally removed the boot, Gwen took her first unassisted steps across Alec's marble floor. He watched from the doorway, silent. She walked all the way to him and placed the key in his hand. "I don't need a place to escape anymore," she said. "I want a place to come home to." He cupped her face, eyes burning. "Then marry me," she smiled. Yes. They wed on the cliffs above the sea, where the wind tangled through Gwen's hair and the ocean crashed below like a heartbeat. Mia cried through the entire ceremony, and Alec's voice cracked as he said her name. There were no fireworks, no press, no grand stage. Just a woman who once believed she had to carry everything alone. And the man who taught her that sometimes, love is the strongest thing you can fall into, even when it starts with a broken ankle on the sand. Gwen's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the silk collar of her dress. The pale ivory fabric clung to her waist before falling in soft waves to the floor, and in the mirror's reflection, she caught the shimmer of sunlight pouring through the arched windows behind her. The house on the cliffs had been transformed, no longer just a retreat or a memory, but now their home. And today it would hold something more than walls and glass. It would hold a promise. A soft knock came at the door, followed by Mia's voice. "They're ready." Gwen turned, her reflection calm but her heartbeat wild. "You sure you're not going to cry again?" Mia stepped in, smoothing her own dress. "I brought tissues. I've learned from experience." Gwen let out a laugh and then immediately covered her mouth, afraid it would dissolve into tears. "Do I look okay?" Mia stepped closer, adjusting a single curl behind Gwen's ear. "You look like someone who finally let herself want everything she deserves." Gwen nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the sea wind lifted the sheer curtains lining the open-air archway Alec had chosen for their vows. The guests were few, just the closest people who mattered. No press, no corporate ties, no one who needed to be impressed. Alec stood at the end of the stone aisle, his suit a crisp shade of slate blue that brought out the darker flecks in his eyes. His hands were clasped in front of him, but his expression betrayed nothing except quiet awe. As Gwen stepped forward, supported by nothing but her own strength, Alec's eyes never left hers. No one spoke. No one needed to. When she reached him, he took her hands, and they turned to face the officiant, a woman Alec had known from his mother's foundation, the only person he said had ever treated him like a human being instead of a headline. "I never imagined I'd be here," Gwen began when it came time to speak. "Not just standing in a place like this, but standing beside someone who sees me for who I am and never once asked me to be anything else." Alec's fingers tightened slightly on hers. "I spent so long pretending I didn't need anyone," she continued. "But you didn't ask to be the center of my life. You just showed up and made space in yours for me, all of me, even the broken parts." Alec's voice was low, but every word carried. "I've held empires in my hands. I've closed deals worth more than most people make in a lifetime. But nothing, not one thing, has ever felt like it mattered. Until you didn't fall into my life, Gwen. You crashed through it, and I've never been the same." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring simple with a single stone that caught the light like water. "And I never want to be the same again." When the ceremony ended and Alec kissed her, the air around them erupted not with noise but with emotion. The applause was distant, the world for a moment small and infinite at once. Later that night, after the last glass of champagne had been poured and the sun had dipped beneath the horizon, Alec led Gwen down a narrow path behind the house, barefoot. She laughed as her dress whispered against the stone, the fabric catching on wild grass. "Where are we going?" she asked, gripping his hand. "You'll see." They reached the edge of the cliff where months ago they'd first shared a kiss under the open sky, but now something new stood there. A studio, all glass and cedar, tucked unobtrusively into the landscape. Inside, a massive drafting table sat beneath a skylight, and along the far wall, shelves brimmed with untouched sketchbooks, paints, and tools. Gwen froze. "You built this," she whispered. "Not just me," Alec said. "I hired a few of the best artisans I could find. You told me once you struggled to create in chaos, so I gave you peace." She took a slow step inside, her gaze traveling over every detail: the wide windows, the soft lighting, the quiet hum of a climate-controlled system meant to preserve paper and pigment. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You're not just part of my life, Gwen. You are my life, and I want you to have every tool, every moment, every breath you need to build yours, too." She turned in his arms and cupped his cheek with her hand. "No one's ever given me something like this. Not because they wanted me to owe them or to fix me, but just because they believed in who I already was." I don't want to fix you, Alec said. I just want to watch you fly. She kissed him there, the scent of sea salt and cedar all around them. In the weeks that followed, Gwen's artwork exploded with new life. She turned commissions away for the first time in her career, choosing instead to pour herself into a series she called Weightless. One morning, Alec wandered into the studio and found her standing before a canvas that depicted a woman floating above a stormy sea, her arms outstretched like wings. I think she's you, he said quietly. I think she's who I used to be, Gwen replied. And I think that woman finally found her sky. Months passed, and the rhythm of their life settled into something that felt both extraordinary and deeply human. There were arguments about paint stains on expensive rugs, about Alec's refusal to turn off his phone during dinner, but they never stayed angry. They'd learned how to fight honestly. More importantly, they'd learned how to listen. On their first anniversary, Alec surprised Gwen with a garden climbing roses and jasmine that filled the air with fragrance all day. She gave him a painting of the two of them, silhouetted against the sea with the words "ours" always scrawled along the bottom. One evening, as the sun dipped low and they lay tangled on the outdoor lounger, Alec brushed Gwen's hair back and gazed at her with a quiet intensity. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been at the beach that day? She shook her head. No. Because I think we would have found each other anyway. How can you be so sure? She smiled, tracing the line of his jaw. Because some things aren't accidents. Some things are just waiting for the right moment. And in that moment, with nothing but the ocean and the stars above them, they knew they had found theirs, together. Forever.